Pact, where we are going to do a little bit of a list review, talk about changes we would maybe make to one of our subscribers' lists, and then talk about maybe one of the lists we would run. We kind of put our brains together at the end and, come up with a list we'd like to run in that detachment. Phil, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm excited to do some foraging and introspection into some detachments that I don't necessarily think about really often. Hopefully, the thoughts that we have regarding your detachment and your faction and the units you want to play can give you a little bit of an idea into some thoughts for your future lists. So yeah, super helpful.
It's going to be a good time. We ended up randomizing it. We had a little short to announce our winner, and it was our subscriber Forrest and his Packbound Zealot CSM list. So why don't we go ahead and run through that real quick and what he had in.
Yeah, so we had some requirements that we were given, but the list as a whole, we'll run through it here really quick. So you can see Packbound Zealots, he said Abaddon, Cypher, a Disco Lord with Marcus Slanesh, and then the Enhancement Intoxicating Elixir, 2 10-man Cultist Mobs, 1 10-man Chosen that are Chaos Undivided. The Cultist Mobs are Marker Nurgle, 2 5-mans of Possessed, 1 Slanesh, 1 Undivided, 3 Predator Destructors, 2 Vindicators, and 1 Chaos Rhino. And Forrest said anything can go besides Abaddon and the tanks.
Yeah, that is a fair chunk of the list that isn't budging. So we had about 1,000 points to play with in this list. What were some of the things that just hopped out at you initially about kind of what this list is going for?
Yeah, so definitely a very strong fire base, right? Like the big units of Predators and Vindicators, and really trying to benefit from Abaddon's rerolls, right? To be as close as possible so you can get full rerolls to hit. Totally understand that. It's pretty good. The 1 10-man of Chosen feels a little strange, especially as well as the 5-man Possessed. Only at 2 damage, I would find that they bump and bounce into a lot of things they don't want to bump and bounce into because they're only 5-mans and they're not going to have enough attacks. Can be a little tough there, so those definitely stood out. No Legionaries, no Bikes, no Nurglings, all of those things that are, I would say, I have found to be very effective scoring pieces are not in this list. It is definitely I'm not going to say stat check because that's not really what it is. It is a very lethal list. And I think lethality is what Forrest is going for here. He just wants to control firing lanes. He wants anything that come out and dies. And then he wants to be able to dominate that aspect of the game, which is a way to do it. So yeah, absolutely. What about you, Lane? What stood out to you?
Yeah, that is a fair amount of vehicles. As a tank fan myself, I do completely understand, wanting that. My tanks are just a little bit bigger and, they're just more concentrated focal point of my points, and they handle buffs a little better because of that, since it is just one vehicle doing 2 tanks worth of shots basically at that point. But yeah, I think there are a couple of oddities as we look here, and things that are just maybe a little tough, I think, to deal with as you look at that list. First of all being, I really like the Mark of Nurgle, and this is one of the first things we kind of, once we really put our heads together, started talking about. The Mark of Nurgle works really well on the Vindicators, Abaddon or not. They just have enough shots that if you're converting those Strength 14 into sustains, that's a very good mathematical thing to have. This detachment does have 1 CP reroll wounds, which is nice to have if you are Chaos Undivided, and that's what we kind of were thinking about for the Predator Destructors. This list, you get a lot of benefit from having Abaddon next to all your vehicles, but the cost of that is you just have a blob of vehicles all sitting in one place, and you potentially are not controlling quite as much of the board because of that. So really just leaning into, the Chosen are really the only thing that can go with Abaddon. So to kind of keep that, he needs to be with some Chosen potentially, play around the Vindicators, be able to really abuse those crits on 5s with some high strength and damage shots. And then your Destructors need to maybe shift to being Undivided so that they have a little more freedom, can just kind of play around from the back line and benefit from the reroll wound stratagem that works really well with those autocannons and las cannon sponsons.
Hey, well, we made 3 lists. Lane made one on his own. I made one on my own. And then we put our, like Lane said, we put our heads together for one that doesn't have the restrictions that Forrest gave us, and more of a general idea of Packbound Zealots and kind of where we would playing into and playing that list, especially with our differing play styles, where we kind of stand with that. So Lane, I believe I am the first one for this list, so I'll go over my initial list for the restrictions that Forrest gave us. So we have Abaddon.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have double Disco Lord. One is a Slanesh Disco Lord. One is a Nurgle Disco Lord. I just think they're so good. I think they're fantastic. I wouldn't be upset seeing one as both as Slanesh, honestly. I think they're really solid, and I'm pretty happy with them. Master of Possession, a 5-man of Chosen. So I reduced the number of Chosen for this list because I need Abaddon to be with somebody. And I don't want him being with a 10-man, especially if we're going to have this big brick of vehicles in the back that are going around doing actions and stuff like that. I'm not a fan. So a 5-man of Chosen, 10-man of Possessed, a squad of 3 Chaos Bikes, 2 Cultist Mobs, 3 Predator Destructors, and double Vindicator. I like this list a little bit more because I'm not investing as heavily into what Abaddon is with. I like 2 Cultist Mobs because the one thing I feel like I'm missing out on in this list is scoring, definitely. I would like to have Nurglings in here. I would like to have a Beast of Nurgle. But points wise, it just did not work. So what I went into was just like, I'm just going to max skew, right? Forrest wants to go lethal. I'll go lethal. The double Disco Lords are incredibly tough. I can make one of the Disco Lords lone op, which I really like. The Master Possession +1 to advance and charge just means that Possessed Brick is super lethal. I just need to find a good staging point for it and send it out. My unit Chaos Bikes, I can also make lone op, which is good for their scoring, survivability. And the Predator Destructors and Vindicators, Lane and I were talking about this a lot. Even with Abaddon, I don't want to play them as a castle. I would not recommend playing them as a castle. So I need them to do other things other than sit around Abaddon. Now, I want to be a little aggressive with Abaddon, so the Vindicators have Mark of Nurgle. The Predator Destructors are Chaos Undivided because I want them in further firing lanes that I can actually control the board, because I can't control the board if they're all standing around Abaddon. I want them to have the reroll the wound strat, and I want them to reroll ones that hit naturally, which gives them a lot of effectiveness, which I definitely like. What do you think, Lane? What are your thoughts?
Well, as we're about to see, I don't really have much that changes from the changes you made. We both kind of ended up on the same page. Yeah, bumping down the Chosen to a 5-man to put to Abaddon, it just feels better. I did not end up with 2 Disco Lords. I just have Abaddon, Cypher, the 1 Disco, and the Master of Possession. Yeah, and then I ended up with 2 units of bikes. I think that was the only thing is I kept Cypher in my list and had another unit of bikes where you went with an additional Disco Lord over those 2 things. Yeah, I feel like, you talked about it earlier, you're just kind of leaning into the skew. And I think you're just really trying to hit that mid-board hard with this list. If you're playing it, you're trying to just have a turn where those Vindicators come out with Abaddon and his Chosen. You're trying to just wipe as much stuff off the table as you can with those units, tie things up. You've got the bikes and the mob to kind of trade early. You've got your Predator Destructors to kind of give you some long-range firepower so you're not overcommitting early, potentially. Yeah, it is tough. We talked a little bit. I think, there might be some detachments where if you are wanting to play Abaddon with 5 vehicles, maybe you look at throwing in new Spicy Vashtor. I think that's definitely another option. I do think that, that is viable. But, we are not CSM pros. This is just the ramblings of some people who are at least interested, I guess. We'll mess around with anything, really. I mean, that's
true.
That's where it's at. But yeah, I think it was pretty cool. We ended up at fairly similar places. You decided to maybe go with a little bit less trash. You had 1 less piece than my list did, but they're fairly similar. And like we talked about, you're just really trying to abuse the lethality of kind of those vehicles and the possessed.
Yeah, for sure. And Forrest, I know you're watching because you have been incredibly engaging, and we appreciate all the comments and all that stuff. So if you want the skew and if you want the lethality part of it, I will say from experience, it is effective. You can do it. I've gone up against and played into many lists that are just like, well, you can't win the game if you're dead, right? Like, I'm just going to punish everything and kill everything. I don't care about necessarily scoring. My custodies do that, right? Like my custodies are like, well, I don't necessarily have the trading pieces. I can't necessarily do the things that a lot of armies can do, but I can just murder you. Like anything I touch just dies. This could be that list, right? Like where you're just like, well, I don't care. I'm just going to go into everything I can get into. The possessed with advance in charge and +1 to advance in charge with the master of possession. I really, really like. And you'll see in our combined list kind of where we're at with that, because I think it's really interesting. So you want to move on to that next list, Lane?
Yeah, I'm excited. We took the gloves off, no restrictions, no Abaddon, no vehicles, just like necessary, really getting to fully play with it. Yeah, it was really interesting. Yeah, let's look at it. We got the first Disco Lord that we're looking at in this list. We had two of them. One was the mark of Tzeentch, and one the mark of Slaanesh and Nurgle. Yeah, so we had those, and then we also have the Master of Possessions, who is obviously going with one of the 10-man possessed mark of Slaanesh, and then a Master of Executions to go with the other 10-man of possessed. They are going to really be able to benefit. There is a 1 CP strat for Fight on Death. If you have the mark of Khorne, it's on a 3-up. We felt was really good, and then the Master of Executions also just it's going to give you reroll hits if it's under starting strength. It's going to give you reroll wounds if it's under half strength. And so some of these knight skews we're going to be seeing, like if you're only able to maybe like get a Vindicator into a big knight and you can't quite finish it off, if you can get it under that half strength with a grenade or something before you go in, you're going to be able to actually just definitely clean it up with that brick. Having there's not access to fights first, so having some fight on death into some of these melee heavy matchups is just very nice to have. We thought, and it also has the enhancement for the extra strength and attack, and then when you do your Dark Pact, you roll a d3 and you get that as well on top of it for extra strength and attacks. You're a minimum of +2 strength and attacks, up to a maximum of +4 to each of those things. So that's pretty good. One of the Discord Lords had the Nurgle marked one, the Orb of Unlife for a Battle Shock and some extra mortals, which is always great to have. Let's see, Nemesis Claw, another great option. Let's just turn off strats for anything that's not a vehicle. Bikes, we've talked about those already, just great for scoring. Were these both Nurgle? I think we also talked about potentially one is Tzeentch, I think we talked about.
Yes, so we had a little bit of secret tech here. Lane and I went back and forth because there's a strat in Packbound Zealots to recover 3 wounds, and then if you're Tzeentch, you get a full model back. I really like that because I think like the bikes coming back can be extremely impactful. And I think it's super valuable. The issue is you have to play them a little differently because you can't expose them in the way that you can with Nurgle bikes, because you can make the Nurgle bikes stealth and lone op, right? But if I can ensure that I only have 1 or 2 things shooting at me, and I can bring some Tzeentch bikes back, I really, really like that. So I think there's some tech there. I personally, my playstyle would benefit from that for sure.
Yeah, and we talked about, I kept trying to fit in a 6-man specifically for the Tzeentch bikes, just because it makes it much easier to really benefit from that. It's a little harder to chew through, but it wasn't in the cards. We felt like there were better things to fit in here, so having the ability to do that is still nice, even with a 3-man. A unit of the Cultist Mob to just be a nice trading piece, and then a unit of Legionaries, just plain no leader. Reroll wounds on objectives, always good for trading. Cannot complain about that. The 2 Vindicators, we stayed in. Mark of Nurgle, again, even without Abaddon, having 5-up crits to hit, pretty good. Pretty good for sustained hits on a strength 14 gun. Cannot complain about that. A Rhino to house the Legionaries and the Nemesis Claw, and then ally in a Beast of Nurgle and some Nurglings. A lot more trading pieces in this list. It's going to be able to play a little bit cagier, which is nice, especially if you are playing with challenger cards now, where getting ahead just punishes you. So you can play a little slower before you yeet your whole army at somebody, potentially. So I would like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really interesting tech in here that if I was a Packbound Zealot player, that I would be considering. One being the turn that I come out, I put the Possessed and the Nemesis Claw, which are going to have Marcus Slaanesh, so them and the Legionaries can be in the Slaanesh Rhino, so we can advance and charge out of there, which is nice. But what I would be doing is like sending the possessed into 2 separate units, and the Nemesis Claw is going into one of those units with the possessed. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to fight the first brick of possessed first into a unit that doesn't have the possessed also an engagement range of, and then that other unit cannot interrupt. They cannot use defensive strats. They cannot use offensive strats. They can't do anything. That way, I almost get a free 2 combats without risk of doing those things, right? And if I can get the possessed into something, which they should murder almost everything, and I can get the Disco Lord into the same target, right? Like I can fight with the possessed, and then the Disco Lord is free if the unit's wiped to pile into something else, and that base is massive. It is huge. So there are some very, very technical things you can do in the combat side that we really enjoy. Master of Executions, having Fight on Death, we already said it, super good. He's got precision. He's got dev wounds. The +1 strength damage, super nice on him. I like it a lot. And there is also a strat for characters after they kill units to get, it's like obnoxious. It's like +1 attacks, +1 strength, +1 damage, +1 move, +1 leadership. Like if they just kill, let's see here, after it kills a unit, just destroys an enemy unit until the end of the battle, add 1 to the move, toughness, and wounds, and add 1 to the attack, strength, and damage characteristic of that character's melee weapons. So like Master of Possessions, he would benefit from that. Master of Executions, he would benefit from that. Unfortunately, the Disco Lords don't. That would be sick, but they do not. But your Master of Executions and the Master of Possessions would definitely benefit from +1 damage, which I like a lot.
Yeah, I felt like we were able to really include a lot of good ways to use your strats within this list. You're able to abuse some of the best ones. Obviously Slanesh being able to advance and charge with the Master Possession, adding +1 to both of those rolls is very good. And then obviously the Fight on Death, a 3-up for the Corn brick as well. Very, very nice. Yeah.
One person we forgot is Cypher.
Yes. Yeah, he's still chilling in there. Can't forget him.
No.
Just doing Cypher things, as always. You can't complain about that. Hiding in the Epic Hero section, new recruit on us.
Yeah. So, would you run this list, Lane? I think that's the next question. Would you be happy, like, if someone gave you this list, would you be happy putting it on the board?
Yeah, I feel confident enough that, like, I think it has enough trading pieces to be able to kind of play that early game. I have enough hammers. It doesn't have the shooting lethality that the original list did, but 2 bricks of Possessed are gonna slap, and I'm really looking forward to that. The Vindicators aren't gonna hit quite as hard without full Abaddon rerolls, but they're still gonna hit, and they're gonna do just fine doing that. Like, I can't complain about that. But yeah, I really do like it. The Disco Lords throwing out mortals is always nice. Like, I just think it's a very well-rounded, more infantry-centric list, and I think infantry really are benefiting a little more currently, unless you are running knights, because knights just are knights. So obviously they aren't losing by not being infantry because they have no option.
Yeah, I mean, this allows you to punch up too. So if your concern is knights, which Lane and I took into consideration when building this list, I just want to point out a few things. Disco Lords, their restriction for mortals, both of them can do it, right? It's not like you only have to select one to do the mortals. So both Disco Lords can do mortal wounds on the same target or different targets. Also, just making sure, they also give reroll 1s to vehicle, to vehicle targets. So you select enemy vehicle, everyone gets reroll 1s in the shooting phase for the entire phase. That's really important because your Vindicators would definitely love, even if they're wounding on 3s or if they're wounding on 2s, for some of these like lighter vehicles, they love access to reroll 1s. It just makes them that much more efficient, especially into big knights, right? It doesn't matter. Reroll 1s is nice, and we're going to take it because that allows us to punch up, right? Like that's what gets us there. And the Disco Lords and the Vindicators will cover you for those tougher matchups. Possessed should be able to go in and clean up little knights. They should be able to go in and clean up a big knight, especially if it's taken any kind of damage, right? Like mathematically, it should do those things. The Master of Executions have dev wounds, which is awesome. As Lane already said, if that thing's below below starting strength, you're rerolling all hits for the unit, which is awesome. If that big knight is below half, even better. You should be cleaning him up with the Master of Execution alone with the amount of dev wounds that he can put out. And then when you have, sustained on 5s, it's nice in combat, right? It just makes you that much more lethal. So I think this list is fantastic.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
If you're really worried about it, possessed once per battle too. Turn on dev wounds for the whole fucking squad.
Yep.
That'll help too for chunking through big stuff. So yeah, I think it definitely can handle a lot of the things in the meta. It's not one of the most commonly played detachments for CSM right now, but even then, I think with this list especially, I would feel fairly comfortable. We talked through a lot of the things we would like to have, and it has enough tricks, it has enough damage, and has enough trading pieces. Like those are some of like the big three, things you can really use to help you win games. And I feel pretty confident about that. I guess we'll just have to get Trey to play it, right? We're just gonna start. Trey, you don't have a choice. You're running this list, whether you want to or not. And we'll see how it goes.
I would love to watch Trey play this list.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. I'll pull out the guard again. Not an excessive amount of damage 3 or anything, but yeah, I'll play him. That sounds like fun. I do not like the Disco Lords. I don't want to see those. Those are gross. Having 2 in here is not the fun. But yeah. I think this is a good starter list for this detachment as something I would recommend for people who are looking to maybe try out Packbound, looking for a change of pace. I think this is a solid list. Any other thoughts about CSM or this detachment, Phil?
No, I think just like a list building thought for you all. As we continue this series, I think it's really important. When we were building this list, things that we're taking into consideration, what's going out onto the middle objective first? Genuinely. So like if we talk about units that need to go out there to score area denial or secure or whatever else that you need to do, like how are you planning to do that? Well, if your army is capable of doing it, and that's the way you're formatting your list, for us in this, depending on the layouts, maybe it's Nurglings that are sitting out there off the objective, turn 1. That way, if they get anything, they can go out there. My Beast of Nurgle, that's going out to the natural objective. It's got a scout move. It's awesome. It's incredibly tough. You're not just going to put trash into it to actually kill it. You won't. What's doing your stuff that are your action secondaries? So like on our home, it's cultist mobs with sticky objectives, which is great because it means I can screen out even better. And chaos bikes, they're mobile. They move 12 inches. I can make them lone op. Like I can push them more than the majority of other units. And Cypher is a single model that is incredibly hard to screen out, and he can go up and down. So that gives us the mobility to consistently score, which is super important, right? To keep the game close. Whether it's me trying to deny my opponent getting challenger cards or me just trying to like pull away with enough of an advantage, Cypher allows us to do that. And then we talk about our like hammer pieces. This list actually has 6 hammer pieces. The 2 Disco Lords, the 2 Possessed, and the 2 Vindicators, and a nice little toolkit unit in the Nemesis clause that allow me to turn off stratagems for a unit, which is even better sometimes than Vect, because it can just kill things that really want to live and fight you back. I think like if we talk about a tool unit or a tool army, this feels pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a nice thing. People always complain too. Ultramarines might not have the 20 CP per game that they used to, but if you just took Nemesis Clause, right, it doesn't matter how much CP you have if you can't target the unit. So, just food for thought. They still are pretty good. Ultramarines are. So, yeah, I think the Nem Clause is just a nice tech piece, like you're talking about. But I digress. I'm looking forward to doing more videos in this series. It's going to be nice to kind of get to interact with the community, give our thoughts on how to shake up a list and maybe look at it from a different scope, and see if there's maybe another line of play to look at. Yeah, awesome. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for tuning in to our first episode of The Forge, and we will be back next week to talk about a new list. Do not forget to go into the Discord and submit a list if you would like it to be reviewed, and it might randomly get picked. But until then, do not forget to like and subscribe, and do not forget that victory isn't given, it's forged, and it's forged right here on Mastercrafted, baby. See ya!